Rain drummed on the roof of the police car as Detective Raven Holloway turned onto Oak Street. A gray morning enveloped the Dallas Industrial District in a foggy veil, as if nature were trying to hide the tragedy that had occurred here. The windshield wipers scraped rhythmically, pushing streams of water across the windshield, and the dispatcher's message repeated in his earpiece. Code 37, suspected domestic homicide, pregnant victim. Holloway hated calls like this. In his 23 years on the homicide squad, he had seen many horrors, but crimes against pregnant women always left particularly deep scars on his soul. After parking, he noticed a crowd of neighbors gathered under umbrellas at a safe distance from the house, which was cordoned off with yellow police tape. Patrol cars with flashing lights colored the wet asphalt with red and blue flashes. The Bladsworth family's one-story house looked abandoned, even by the standards of this poor neighborhood. Peeling paint, a broken window on the porch taped shut with duct tape, a front yard overgrown with weeds. The Dallas police were regular visitors to places like this, usually responding to calls about domestic violence or drugs. But today, it was much worse. "Detective Holloway," nodded the young patrolman, lifting the crime scene tape. "They're inside. The doctors say the woman was 8 months pregnant." Raven nodded, putting on blue gloves. He tried not to wince at the thought that 2 lives had been cut short today. Inside the house, it smelled of damp, medicine, and blood. The patrol officers and forensic technicians moved as if in slow motion, trying not to disturb the numerous pieces of evidence. Holloway glanced around the living room with an experienced eye. An overturned coffee table, broken photographs, empty bags of white powder by the sofa, signs of a struggle and drugs, a classic combination for crimes like this. "Raven, you're just in time," Dr. Nico Windsor beckoned the detective into the hallway leading to the bedroom. "Get ready. It's pretty graphic in there." Holloway had known Nico for over 10 years. The tall, thin medical examiner with a clean-shaven head and piercing eyes specialized in cases involving drugs and psychosis. If he had been called to the scene, it meant this was no ordinary domestic murder. The bedroom resembled the set of a horror movie. The walls were splattered with blood, and the bedding was soaked through. On the bed lay the body of a young black woman in a nightgown, with a huge, tightly stretched pregnant belly. Her face was frozen in an expression of genuine horror, her eyes wide open. Multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen left no doubt as to the cause of death. "Odette Bloodsworth, 33 years old," Windsor said quietly, carefully lifting the victim's hand. According to neighbors, she worked as a nurse at St. Joseph's Clinic. She was 32 weeks pregnant. Judging by the body temperature and rigor mortis, she died about 3 hours ago, between 4 and 5 in the morning. "And the baby?" Holloway asked, already knowing the answer. "No chance." Nico shook his head. 3 bullets hit her right in the stomach. Looks like the shooter was aiming for that spot. The detective slowly walked around the bed, trying not to step on the shell casing scattered across the floor. 9mm, he noted. "Was it fired from close range?" "Point-blank range," Windsor nodded. "The gunpowder residue around the wounds indicates that the shooter was no more than 30 centimeters away. She probably knew the killer and didn't expect to be attacked." "Husband?" Holloway was already looking for family photos. "In the garage," Nico pointed to the door at the far end of the hallway. "And yes, everything points to him. Neighbors heard screams about demons and the devil shortly before the shots were fired." When the patrol arrived, he was in a state of severe drug intoxication, mumbling something incoherent. The gun was lying next to him, and preliminary ballistics confirmed that it was fired. "Okay, let's take a look at our suspect." Holloway headed for the garage but stopped at the door. "By the way, who called the police?" "The neighbors on the left, the Johnsons," Windsor replied. Johnson claims he woke up to screams at around 4:30 a.m., then heard several shots in quick succession. He called 911 at 9:01 a.m., and the patrol arrived 7 minutes later. The garage was a small, cluttered room that had been converted into something resembling a workshop. Tools lay scattered among empty bottles and used syringes. In the corner, a black man sat on a folding chair, attended by 2 paramedics. His wrists were handcuffed, his eyes glassy and lifeless. "Tristan Bloodsworth, 35 years old," one of the medics introduced him. Severe intoxication, presumably from a mixture of psychoactive substances, blood pressure unstable, pupils dilated, minimal response to stimuli. Holloway crouched down in front of the suspect, trying to make eye contact. "Mr. Bloodsworth? My name is Detective Holloway. Do you understand where you are?" Tristan slowly raised his gaze. His face was covered in sweat, his lower lip trembling. "It's inside her," he whispered hoarsely. "Can you hear them? They won't shut up. The voices are getting louder. Dogs know the truth. All dogs know." "What happened to your wife, Mr. Bloodsworth?" "She's not my wife." Tristan suddenly perked up, jerking at his handcuffs. "She's a shell. The demon used her. It pretended to love me, but I found out. They told me the truth." "Who told you the truth?" Holloway kept his voice steady and calm, writing every word down in his notebook. "Voices." Tristan's eyes widened. "They come at night, whispering in my ears. At first I thought I was going crazy, but then I realized it was a warning. There wasn't a baby in her belly. Not my baby. It was something from another world. From the neighbor's dog. I saw it moving inside, trying to get out." The medics exchanged glances. One of them leaned toward the detective. "He's been like this since we arrived. Classic drug psychosis with paranoid elements. There are traces of multiple injections of various ages on his arms. Judging by the appearance, he's been addicted for a long time." "Take him to the Central Hospital," Holloway ordered. "Full toxicology work, psychiatric evaluation, constant police surveillance. Let me know as soon as he's coherent enough to talk." When the medics took Tristan away, the detective returned to the house, where the crime scene investigators were still gathering evidence. Windsor supervised the photographing and collection of blood samples. "I want to talk to the neighbors," Holloway said. "Find out more about our couple." "Start with the house on the left," Nico advised. "The man claims to have heard screams coming from the Bladsworths' house frequently in recent months." The rain had almost stopped when Holloway stepped onto the porch. He headed for the neat, single-story house next door, where an elderly man with a worried expression was already waiting on the porch. "Earl Johnson," he said, shaking the detective's hand. "What a terrible tragedy. I always told my wife there was something wrong with Tristan, but no one expected this. Tell me about the Bladsworth family, Mr. Johnson." "How long have they lived here?" "About 3 years," Johnson said, inviting the detective to sit in a wicker chair on the porch. "At first, everything was fine. Tristan worked as a truck driver and made good money. Odette was a nurse, a lovely woman. They seemed like a happy couple and wanted a child." "What changed?" "About a year ago, Tristan lost his job. Something happened to his truck, an accident or a breakdown, I'm not sure. After that, he became a completely different person. He started disappearing for days at a time and coming back in terrible shape. Odette cried a lot. I heard them arguing." "Drugs?" "Probably," Johnson nodded. "It's not uncommon in our neighborhood. I've seen that guy from the corner of Maple Avenue, Quan, hanging around their place. Everyone knows what he's up to." "When was the last time you spoke to Odette?" "The day before yesterday." Johnson lowered his eyes. "She was scared. She said Tristan hadn't slept in 3 days, that he was talking to invisible people and accusing her of cheating on him. I offered to call the police, but she refused. She was afraid they'd arrest him, and she'd be left alone to give birth." "Did she mention anything about her husband acting strangely toward her pregnancy?" "Yes, and that's the strangest thing." Johnson lowered his voice, as if afraid they were being listened to. "About a month ago, Tristan started saying strange things about the baby, that it wasn't his child, that there was something wrong with it. Odette said that he sometimes put his ear to her stomach and claimed he could hear strange voices." "What about the dogs?" Holloway asked, remembering Tristan's delusional statements. Johnson frowned. "It's strange you should ask. A few days ago, I saw Tristan standing in front of our fence, staring at our Rottweiler, Max, for a long time. He was whispering something and shaking his fist. My wife said he was shouting accusations, as if our dog was somehow connected to Odette's pregnancy. Complete nonsense." Holloway wrote down every detail. The picture of mental illness, exacerbated by drugs, was becoming clearer. "When exactly did Tristan's mental health issues begin? Did he ever see a doctor?" "Odette said she tried to take him to a psychiatrist about 6 months ago. He was even prescribed some pills, but then he stopped taking them, saying they blocked the truth or something like that. After talking to Johnson, the detective interviewed several other neighbors. All accounts were consistent. In recent months, Tristan had shown clear signs of mental illness and drug addiction, and his behavior had become increasingly paranoid as Odette's pregnancy progressed. Returning to the Bladsworth home, Holloway found Odette's body being prepared for transport to the morgue. Nico Windsor sat at the kitchen table, looking through the prescriptions found in the house. Olanzapine, quetiapine, he listed. Powerful antipsychotics. The last prescription is dated 3 months ago, but it looks like most of the pills are still there. We found the bottles in the trash can. Typical story, Holloway sighed. Stopped taking his medication, went back to drugs, psychosis worsened. We found Odette's diary in the bedroom. Nico handed the detective a plastic bag containing evidence. The last entries are quite disturbing. She wrote that Tristan was becoming obsessed with the idea that the child wasn't his, that he was infected or carrying something terrible. We need to check if she really had any extramarital affairs, Holloway said thoughtfully. Sometimes even the most delusional ideas can contain a grain of truth. Judging by her notes, she was completely faithful to her husband. Windsor shook his head. But in recent months, she did avoid physical intimacy because of his unstable condition. Perhaps that intensified his paranoia. Holloway nodded and continued his search of the house. In the small room intended for the future child, he found an unfinished crib and several stuffed animals. On the wall hung a calendar with the due date marked 5 weeks from now. This detail made the detective clench his teeth in anger and helplessness. Examining the master bedroom more closely, Holloway noticed a cabinet door ajar. Pulling on the handle, he discovered something that made him freeze. Hidden behind clothes in the back of the closet was a homemade altar. Photos of Odette, obviously taken secretly, were hung on the wall. In each picture, her pregnant belly was circled in red marker. The words written around the photos formed a gruesome picture of madness. Not mine. Demon inside. They betrayed me. The voices are right. In the center of the altar lay a collar, clearly a dog collar, with a tag engraved with the name Max, the name of the neighbor's Rottweiler. "Nico," Holloway called to the medical examiner. "You should see this." Windsor entered the room and whistled when he saw the altar. "Full-blown psychotic delusions," he said. "Classic pattern, photographs, symbols, fixation on certain objects. He built a whole paranoid reality around this pregnancy. And killed 2 people because of voices in his head," Holloway finished grimly, taking pictures of the altar. "Technically," Nico remarked cautiously, "from a legal standpoint, he could be found not guilty by reason of insanity." "That's for the court to decide," the detective snapped. "Our job is to gather all the evidence and piece together a complete picture of what happened." As he left the Bloodsworth home, Holloway took one last look at the crime scene. The rain intensified again, washing the blood from the driveway. But no amount of rain could wash away the images etched in the detective's memory. The dead pregnant woman, her distraught husband, and the gruesome altar in the closet, testimony to how far human madness can go. Raven Holloway's office at the Dallas Police Department was a small room with a single window overlooking the parking lot. The walls were decorated with dozens of crime scene photos, a board with notes on current cases, and his FBI Academy diploma. Tuesday morning began for the detective with strong black coffee and a heavy folder containing the preliminary investigation results of the murder of Odette Bloodsworth. 2 days had passed since the tragedy. The young woman's body was still in the morgue, where Dr. Windsor was conducting a detailed autopsy. Tristan Bloodsworth had been placed in the psychiatric ward of the county jail hospital under constant supervision. His condition remained unstable, but doctors were gradually bringing him out of his drug-induced psychosis with medication. Holloway laid out photos from the crime scene, documents, and notes from neighbors' statements on the table. To understand what had led to this tragedy, he would have to delve deeper into the lives of the Bladesworths, back to the day when everything went wrong. First on his list was a visit to St. Joseph's Clinic, where Odette worked. The medical facility was located 20 minutes' drive from the crime scene, a small neighborhood clinic that served mainly low-income patients. He was greeted in the reception area by the administrator, an elderly woman with attentive eyes, who showed him to the chief physician's office. Dr. Cheryl Williams, a heavy-set black woman in her 50s with short silver hair, looked tired and depressed. "We still can't believe it," she said, motioning Holloway to a chair. "Odette was one of our best nurses. The patients adored her." "How long had she been working here?" the detective asked, opening his notebook. "Almost 6 years. She came straight from medical school," Dr. Williams said, picking up a framed photograph on the desk. It showed the clinic staff celebrating some kind of event, with Odette smiling and full of life in the center of the group. "She had a real talent for calming patients and getting through to them." "What about her husband? Did he come here often?" Dr. Williams' face darkened. "He used to. In the early years of their marriage, Tristan would sometimes pick her up after her shift, bring her flowers, wait for her in the lobby, the usual caring husband. But in the last year, everything changed." "What exactly changed?" "About 11 months ago, Tristan lost his job. He was in an accident with his truck. No one was hurt, but the company fired him. Odette said he was really upset and couldn't find a new job. And then..." She paused. "He started using drugs." "Did she discuss this with you?" "Not right away. At first, we just noticed changes in her. Odette became distracted, was often late, and looked exhausted. About 6 months ago, she came to me in tears and told me that Tristan was seriously addicted to some kind of substance and had become aggressive and paranoid. I advised her to see a psychiatrist and recommended a good specialist." "And did they go?" "Yes, Odette managed to convince her husband to undergo treatment. He was diagnosed with early-stage schizophrenia, exacerbated by substance abuse, and was prescribed medication. Things got better for a while." Holloway nodded, taking notes. The story was familiar. First job loss, then drugs as a way to escape reality, and finally, the exacerbation of an underlying mental disorder. "How did she react to the news that she was pregnant?" "She was happy," Dr. Williams smiled. "She and Tristan had been trying to have a baby for a long time. Odette admitted that she had conceived before Tristan's problems started. She hoped the news of the baby would help him get his act together." "But something went wrong?" "In recent months, she seemed increasingly worried. Once I found her crying in the doctor's office. She said that Tristan had started using again and had stopped taking his medication. And worst of all, he had become obsessed with strange ideas about the baby." "What kind of ideas?" "That the baby wasn't his, that there was something wrong with the fetus." Dr. Williams shook her head. "Complete nonsense, of course. We did an ultrasound, and the baby was developing perfectly normally." After talking to the chief physician, Holloway spoke with several of Odette's colleagues. They all described her as a responsible, kind nurse who had clearly been under pressure in recent months due to a difficult home situation. A conversation with Michelle Cornell, Odette's closest friend at work, proved particularly valuable. "She was afraid of him, Detective," Michelle whispered, looking around nervously, as if afraid they were being listened to. In recent weeks, Odette started coming to work by taxi, even though she always used their family car before. She said that Tristan hardly slept at night, walked around the house muttering something about voices and betrayal. "Did she go to the police?" "No." Michelle shook her head. "She loved him, no matter what. She believed she could help him. Besides, she was afraid of being left alone with the child if he was imprisoned or forcibly hospitalized." "What did she say about his obsessive ideas about the child?" "Terrible things," Michelle shrugged. "The last time we spoke, Odette said that Tristan had started performing strange rituals. He would put his ear to her stomach and claim that he could hear strange noises. He said that the neighbor's dog had somehow influenced the baby, that it was some kind of interspecies demon. Complete drug-induced nonsense." After recording her statement, Holloway left the clinic with a heavy heart. The picture of a ruined life was becoming clearer. A talented nurse who dreamed of a family and her husband, gradually sinking into the abyss of drug-induced madness. The next step in the investigation was to find the drug dealer who was supplying Tristan. According to neighbors, a certain Quan Jackson had been a frequent visitor to the Bloodsworth home in recent months. Finding Quan proved easy. Patrol officers led the detective to a dilapidated apartment building on Maple Avenue, where Jackson spent most of his time. After a brief arrest for drug possession, Bags of white powder were found in his jacket pocket. He was taken to the station for questioning. Quan Jackson, a thin 38-year-old man with dreadlocks and numerous tattoos, sat across from Holloway in the interrogation room, nervously drumming his fingers on the table. "Listen, I don't know anything about the murder," he began without waiting for questions. "Tristan was a client, nothing more." "How long have you known him?" Holloway asked, turning on the tape recorder. "About a year. He started buying from me after that truck accident. Just weed at first, to relax, nothing serious. And then?" Quan sighed, realizing that cooperating with the police in this case was more beneficial than remaining silent. "Then he needed something stronger, cocaine, methamphetamine. He said he needed to stay alert to look for work. The usual story," he shrugged. "But in the last few months, he's been acting strange." "Strange in what way?" "He became interested in psychedelics, LSD, mushrooms, DMT. He said they helped him see reality as it is, typical drug paranoia. But then his requests became frightening." Holloway leaned forward. "Tell me more." "He started mixing substances. He asked for the strongest tryptamines, saying he needed to break through the veil of illusion." Quan shook his head. "I tried to talk him out of it. Such mixtures are dangerous even for experienced psychonauts. But he insisted, saying that they knew the truth about his wife and child." "Who is they?" "The voices he heard. He said the neighbor's dogs were relaying messages to him, that his child wasn't human, but some kind of creature from another dimension." Quan laughed nervously. "I deal drugs, detective, but even I was creeped out by his ravings." "When did you last see him?" "The day before? Well, you know." Quan lowered his eyes. He was in bad shape. He hadn't slept in days, it seemed. His eyes were red, his movements jerky. He bought a large dose right away, a mixture of crystal meth and synthetic cannabinoids. I warned him it was dangerous, but he wouldn't listen. "What did you talk about?" "He said the time has come, that the essence inside her will soon break free." He said something about betrayal at the genetic level and dog voices that had revealed the truth to him. I thought it was just a trip, the usual nonsense of someone high. Holloway took detailed notes. A picture of Tristan's psychosis was becoming clearer. "Did he say anything about plans to harm his wife?" "Not directly." Quan paused. "But he said one thing that now seems creepy. Something like, sometimes you have to destroy the shell to free the world from what's inside. I thought it was just another metaphor from someone tripping." After questioning Quan, Jackson Holloway returned to headquarters, where the results of Tristan's blood toxicology report were waiting for him. Dr. Windsor was already studying them when the detective entered the lab. "This is the worst cocktail I've seen in years," said the medical examiner, pointing to the printouts. "LSD in huge concentrations, synthetic cannabinoids, methamphetamine, traces of cocaine, and most dangerously, DMT, dimethyltryptamine." "What's that?" "A powerful hallucinogen. It causes intense visual and auditory hallucinations, distortion of time and space perception. In shamanic cultures, it is believed to open doors to other dimensions." Windsor shook his head. "Combined with methamphetamine and sleep deprivation, such a mixture could cause severe psychosis even in a healthy person. And with Tristan, with his untreated schizophrenia, a perfect storm," Holloway finished. "Exactly. Based on the concentration of substances in his blood, we can assume that at the time of the murder, he was in a state of severe psychosis. It's unlikely that he was fully aware of his actions. But he was aware enough to load the gun and shoot his wife several times," the detective remarked grimly. "That's a tricky point for the court," Windsor nodded. "Such psychoses can result in surprisingly purposeful actions within the framework of a delusional idea. If he really believed that he was not killing his wife and child, but some kind of demonic entity, then from his distorted point of view, his actions were completely rational." After meeting with Windsor, the detective went to the prison hospital where Tristan was being held. The psychiatrist who had been observing him reported that the suspect's condition was gradually stabilizing as the drugs were being flushed out of his system, but he was still not fully coherent. "Can I talk to him?" Holloway asked. "Not for long," nodded the doctor. "He's relatively clear-headed right now, but we're keeping him on tranquilizers." Tristan Bloodsworth, strapped to a hospital bed with soft straps, looked exhausted and emaciated. Sunken eyes, pale skin, twitching limbs, the classic picture of withdrawal. "Mr. Bloodsworth," Holloway began, sitting down next to the bed, "do you remember what happened?" Tristan slowly turned his head. "Vaguely," he croaked. "It was like it wasn't me, like I was watching a movie. Tell me what you remember." Voices. Tristan closed his eyes. They wouldn't stop, for days on end. They said Odette had betrayed me, that what was inside her wasn't my child, something inhuman. "And you believed those voices?" "They showed me proof." Tristan opened his eyes, his gaze filled with sincere conviction. "I saw it moving inside her, not like a human child. I heard its thoughts. It wanted to destroy me after it was born." "Where do you think this inhuman child came from?" "From the neighbor's dog," Tristan said in a tone that suggested he was explaining the obvious. "Not directly, of course. Through some entity that used the dog as a conduit. I saw Odette talking to that dog when she thought I wasn't looking. They were exchanging information." Holloway took notes, keeping his expression neutral. "When did you first start hearing these voices?" "After the accident," Tristan swallowed. "I hit my head hard. The doctor said I was fine, but I felt like something had changed. At first, the voices were barely audible, whispers on the edge of consciousness. But then, when I started taking substances, they got louder, clearer." "Were you taking the medication prescribed for schizophrenia?" "For a while," Tristan nodded. "But they drowned out the voices, and I realized that the voices were trying to help me, to warn me. The pills are a conspiracy by the doctors to hide the truth." The conversation lasted almost an hour. Holloway methodically documented Tristan's delusional ideas, noting how realistic they were to the suspect himself. Despite the obvious absurdity of his beliefs, Tristan recounted them with frightening logic and consistency. After visiting the hospital, the detective returned to the Bloodsworths' house for a more thorough search. The forensic team had already finished their work, taking fingerprints and collecting blood samples. Now Holloway was looking for something specific. Tristan's diary or notes that might shed light on the evolution of his madness. In the garage, which served as Tristan's workshop, the detective found what he was looking for. Under a pile of tools lay a worn, leather-bound notebook. Putting on gloves, Holloway carefully leafed through the pages filled with incoherent notes and gruesome drawings. The first pages, dated last year, contained relatively normal entries, job searches, financial calculations, to-do lists. But about halfway through the book, the tone changed dramatically. There were references to strange sounds and voices on the edge of consciousness. One entry, made 8 months ago, read, "Today they spoke to me for the first time, clearly, distinctly. They said I was special, that I could see things others couldn't." The entries became increasingly disturbing. Tristan recorded his discoveries about his neighbors, doctors, random passers-by, anyone he suspected of being involved in the conspiracy. He paid particular attention to his neighbor's dog. "This dog is not just an animal. It looks at me with a knowing gaze. Today I saw Odette petting him through the fence. They were exchanging information, I'm sure. Something was being passed from him to her." The most disturbing entries were made after Odette announced her pregnancy. At first they were full of joy and plans for the future, but gradually the tone changed. "Odette's belly is growing too fast. It's not natural. Yesterday I put my hand on it while she was sleeping and felt a strange pulsation, not like a human heartbeat. I put my ear to her belly. Whatever's inside is making noises, but not like a human baby should. More alien." The last entries, made a few days before the murder, were almost illegible. Jumbled lines written by someone in a state of extreme agitation. "They told me the truth. It's not my child. The DNA was altered, replaced. The dog is just a conduit. The creature inside her is a hybrid, an interspecies demon sent to destroy me. The voices won't shut up. They demand action. They say there's little time left. If it is born, it will be too late." The last entry was made, judging by the date, on the night before the murder. "I've prepared everything I need. I feel sorry for Odette. She's just a vessel. She doesn't know what's inside her. But there is no choice. The voices showed me the future. If it is born, the end will begin. I have to stop this. I am the chosen one. Closing the diary, Holloway felt a chill run down his spine. Before him unfolded a story of progressive madness, from the first symptoms to full-blown psychosis leading to double murder. Back at the station, the detective wrote a detailed report, attaching copies of the diary pages as evidence of Tristan's mental state. The final touch was a note from the psychiatrist who had treated Bloodsworth 3 months before the tragedy. The document stated that Tristan had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and prescribed a course of antipsychotic drugs. But the last entry in his medical record, dated a month before the murder, contained an alarming note. Patient did not show up for appointment. He said on the phone that he had stopped taking his medication because it was preventing him from seeing the truth. Urgent hospitalization recommended. Holloway closed the case file and rubbed his tired eyes. The story of Tristan Bloodsworth was a vivid illustration of how dangerous the combination of untreated mental illness and hard drugs can be, a volatile mix that turned an ordinary man into a murderer of his own family, completely convinced that he was saving the world from a demonic threat. Rain drummed on the roof of the county prison hospital as Detective Raven Holloway climbed the steps of the main entrance. A week had passed since the murder of Odette Bloodsworth. 7 days of painstaking work, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and conducting forensic examinations. Now the investigation had almost a complete picture of what had happened. All that remained was to dot the I's and cross the T's. In the hospital lobby, he was met by Dr. Lawrence Gabriel, the institution's chief psychiatrist, a tall, graying man with an attentive gaze and calm movements. "Detective Holloway," he said, extending his hand, "we have completed our preliminary examination of Mr. Bloodsworth. The results are impressive, to say the least." "How serious is his condition?" Holloway asked, following the doctor down a long corridor with linoleum floors and sterile white walls. "Very serious." Dr. Gabriel opened the door to the conference room, where medical charts and reports were already laid out on the table. "We have diagnosed him with severe drug-induced psychosis with paranoid schizophrenia. Given his history of heavy psychedelic drug use, we are dealing with a classic case of drug-induced psychotic disorder with elements of delirium." Holloway sat down at the table and opened his notebook. "Can you explain what that means in terms of his sanity at the time of the crime?" Dr. Gabriel took a deep breath. At the time of the murder, Mr. Bloodsworth was, in all likelihood, in an acute psychotic state. Toxicological analysis showed extremely high concentrations of psychoactive substances in his blood. The combination of LSD, synthetic cannabinoids, and methamphetamine, with prolonged use and no sleep for several days. The doctor shook his head. "These are ideal conditions for a complete detachment from reality. So he wasn't aware that he was killing his wife and unborn child? From a medical standpoint, probably not. Judging by his own statements and the diary entries you provided, he was convinced that he was killing some kind of demonic entity that threatened humanity. This is classic messianic delusion. The patient believes he has a special mission to save the world." Holloway tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notepad. "How will this affect the trial?" "I'm not a lawyer, Detective," Dr. Gabriel said cautiously. "But from a medical point of view, we have serious grounds for declaring him insane at the time of the crime. That doesn't mean he'll escape punishment. Most likely, the court will order him to undergo long-term compulsory treatment in a secure psychiatric facility. Has his condition improved over the past week?" "Significantly," nodded the psychiatrist. "We've removed most of the drugs from his system and started a course of antipsychotic therapy. The hallucinations have almost stopped and the voices have fallen silent. He is now beginning to realize what has happened, but his mind is protecting him from full understanding, a normal defense mechanism in such traumatic events." "Can I talk to him?" "Yes, but be careful. He is still emotionally unstable. We are keeping him under observation and on sedatives." Tristan Bloodsworth's room was in the high-security wing, a small room with a barred window, a bed bolted to the floor, and a surveillance camera on the ceiling. When Holloway entered, Tristan was sitting on the bed, staring blankly at his hands. He looked haggard, thin, with deep shadows under his eyes, but much more coherent than when they first met. "Mr. Bloodsworth, do you remember me?" asked the detective, sitting down in a chair opposite him. "Detective Holloway." Tristan slowly raised his eyes. "I remember. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "You were there, after everything. How are you feeling today?" "Empty," Tristan swallowed. "The voices are gone, for the first time in months. Silence. And what do you think now that the voices have stopped?" Tristan was silent for a long time, his gaze falling back to his hands. "I'm not sure what was real and what wasn't," he finally said. "Dr. Gabriel says that all my visions, the voices, were a disease exacerbated by drugs, that there was no demonic entity, that the child was normal, my child." "But you still have doubts?" Holloway asked cautiously. "You don't understand." Tristan looked up at him, his eyes haunted. It was so real. The voices, the visions, they were clearer than the real world. I saw a creature moving inside her, not like a human fetus. I heard its thoughts, its plans. It was convincing. Holloway nodded, taking notes. "Tristan, we checked Odette's phone. We found a lot of messages and emails." The name of his wife made Bloodsworth flinch. Tears welled up in his eyes. "She was trying to help you," the detective continued. "She made appointments for you to see specialists. She even filed for involuntary hospitalization, but she didn't have time to complete the process. I remember how she begged me to take my medication," Tristan whispered, "but it made the world dull. Voices told me the pills were a conspiracy to keep me from seeing the truth." "What about drugs?" "They made the voices clearer, the world more understandable. Or so I thought." He shook his head. "It all started after that truck accident. I hit my head really hard. The doctor said I was fine, but then the headaches and insomnia started. At first I just smoked weed to relax. Then I needed something stronger." Holloway opened the case file and took out a photograph, an ultrasound image of a fetus. "This is your child, Tristan. A normal, healthy boy at 32 weeks. Bladsworth glanced at the photo warily but did not touch it. "I saw something else," he whispered. "When I put my ear to Odette's belly, I heard a heartbeat that wasn't human, something alien." "That was your illness, Tristan. Hallucinations caused by a combination of schizophrenia and drugs." "I don't know what to believe," he said, covering his face with his hands. "If the doctors are right, then I killed my wife and son because of visions, because of voices in my head?" "We conducted an investigation," said Holloway. "We interviewed your neighbors, Odette's colleagues, your dealer, Quan." At the mention of Quan, Tristan raised his head. "He admitted that he sold you a particularly powerful batch of synthetic drugs the day before the incident," the detective continued. "He said he warned you about the dangers of such a dose, especially in combination with other substances you were already taking." "Yes," Tristan nodded slowly. "He said something like that, but I didn't listen. I needed to see more clearly. The voices were getting more insistent, demanding action." "You took all these substances to amplify the voices?" "To understand them better. They said the time was almost up, that soon it would be too late." Tristan rubbed his temple. "After that last dose, everything became crystal clear. I saw the demon inside Odette stirring, ready to break free. I heard the neighbor's dog relaying commands. It all came together." Holloway took another document from the folder. "Mr. Bloodsworth, these are the results of the DNA test we conducted. The samples were taken from you and from the child during the autopsy." Tristan flinched but didn't look away. "The test confirms, with a probability of 99.9%, that you were the biological father of the child." Holloway placed the document on the bed next to Tristan. "It was your son, a normal, healthy, human child." Tristan stared at the test results for a long time, his hands beginning to shake. Then he slowly picked up the sheet of paper, reading every word, every number. His face contorted, his eyes filling with tears. "My son," he whispered, and something broke in his voice. "He was my son, and I—" He didn't finish the sentence, clenching the sheet of paper until his knuckles turned white. For the first time since his arrest, his face reflected the full realization of what he had done. Horror, shock, disbelief. The mental defenses that had shielded him from reality collapsed under the weight of irrefutable evidence. "Oh God," he sobbed, his body shaking. "What have I done? What have I done?" Holloway silently watched the transformation taking place in Tristan. It was the hardest moment in a detective's work. The moment when the criminal fully realizes his actions and the illusions dissipate, leaving only the naked, terrifying truth. A few minutes later, Dr. Gabriel entered the room, concerned about the patient's condition. He gave Tristan a sedative injection and asked the detective to end the conversation. "I'll be back tomorrow," Holloway said, standing up. "We need to record your official statement for the court." Tristan did not answer, continuing to cry silently, clutching the DNA test results. As he left the prison hospital, Detective Holloway was met by Dr. Windsor with the final autopsy results. "Everything has been confirmed," said the medical examiner, handing him the report. Odette Bloodsworth died from multiple gunshot wounds. The male fetus, 32 weeks gestation, died as a result of penetrating wounds to the mother's abdomen. No abnormalities or pathologies were found in the fetus, a completely healthy, normally developing boy. "Thanks, Nico." Holloway took the report but did not open it. "What do you think? How will it play out in court? With this evidence?" Windsor shrugged. The psychiatric evaluation, toxicology report, diaries, witness statements. Everything points to acute psychosis at the time of the crime. He'll almost certainly be found not guilty by reason of insanity. And what will that mean for Tristan? Involuntary treatment in a maximum security psychiatric facility instead of prison. Possibly for life. Windsor shook his head. Although, judging by his reaction today, the realization of what he has done may prove worse than any prison. The rain intensified as the detective stepped into the parking lot. The gray Dallas sky seemed to mourn the tragedy of the Bloodsworth family. "You know what's most frightening about this case?" Holloway asked, stopping at his car. "It's how thin the line is between reality and illusion. To Tristan, his delusions were completely real. The demons, the conspiracies, the voices. He acted logically within his own distorted reality. The human brain is an amazing and frightening tool." Windsor nodded. "We perceive the world through the prism of neurochemical processes. Change the chemistry, and reality changes. And where's the guarantee that our perception is more correct?" Holloway said thoughtfully. "What if we're all living in our own illusions, and our illusions just happen to coincide?" Windsor smiled. "Are you becoming a philosopher in your old age, Raven?" "Just thinking," the detective said, opening the car door. "Every time I come across cases like this, I think about how fragile what we call normality is. One wrong turn, one chemical reaction in the brain, and you're on the other side. That's why I always tell my students, drugs are not toys," Windsor said seriously, "especially when combined with a genetic predisposition to mental illness. It's like throwing a match into a gas tank. You never know when it's going to explode." Holloway nodded as he got behind the wheel. Tomorrow he had to finish his report, prepare all the materials for the prosecutor's office, and record Tristan's official statement. Routine detective work, putting an end to yet another tragic story. But today, driving home through the rain-soaked streets of Dallas, Raven Holloway thought about how easily a person could lose touch with reality, about how drugs had destroyed not only Tristan's mind, but also the lives of everyone around him, about how an ordinary family that had dreamed of having a child had been destroyed by madness fueled by chemicals, and about the irreparable damage these substances do to society, turning loving husbands into murderers, blurring the line between reality and nightmare, shattering lives into pieces that can never be put back together again. In the rearview mirror, he saw the prison hospital building receding into the distance, where Tristan Bloodsworth had begun his long, painful journey to full awareness of what he had done. A journey that was perhaps more terrifying than any punishment the justice system could have devised.